Hi, everybody, and welcome to God's Views on Political News. We have Bill, who is on the road, and so he's in Texas, and it seems like we have a great connection today, so I'm so glad that you're here. Bill, good to see you.
Well, good to be seen. Yeah, greetings from West Texas. It's windy today. I don't know if anybody out there has ever been to West Texas, but it's flat and it's windy, and it's wide open. So if you're particular about your hair in West Texas, you should probably wear a hat.
Go someplace else, right? Yeah, go to California, where today in Southern California it's over 100, and it was again yesterday. So we're having summer weather. We always get this in October. It's kind of it's a weird weather. It gets really hot, and it's what's called Santa Anas. We have the winds blowing in from the desert, and that's where we get a lot of fires.
Well, I knew it got that hot like up, in Redding and Sacramento, but I didn't realize it got that hot in San Diego.
Yeah, well, what can I say? This time of year is always crazy. This is when we've had our fires, and so pray for us that people who would commit to arson are watching the news and know what the weather's like, and that the Santa Anas are kicking up and stuff like that.
Wow, I sure will. Wow.
Yeah. Well, okay, today we're going to talk about a subject that is just absolutely, it's crazy, Bill. I think there are a lot of people don't really know about it, and the people who do know about it, it's really hard to describe and to really realize what's going on. But let's delve into it. This is, I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's uranium-1. And I don't know if everybody remembers, back in 2009, when this was under Obama, and this was Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State, they decided we were going to reset our relationship with Russia. And You may recall where Hillary went in and she had this little,
big red button, yeah.
Big red button, that she stole from Staples. And so that the whole concept and handed it over, this is going to be, we're going to reset our relationship with you. And they immediately said, look at this is what it says on there in Russian. They had written it on there. And so they, the guy that she gave it to, the Russian she handed it to, kind of had this bizarre, confused look on his face. And she said, we got it right, didn't we? We got it right. And he said, no, that's the wrong word. That means overcharged. Now,
I don't remember hearing that, but that's hilarious. I'm sorry.
Well, you wonder with the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton, was that intentional or was that something just, happenstance? But anyway.
I'm going to choose to believe it was just they goofed, because that makes it a lot more funny. Anyway.
It makes it a lot funny. But I think, the American people are the only people that got overcharged. And let me tell you why. Let me kind of go on with what happened. Now, around 2009, the State Department and the Committee on Foreign Investments agreed to sell part of uranium-1 to a Canadian company, Rosatom, R-O-S-A-T-O-N, Rosatom. And what that did was it gave away 20% of America's uranium. So we gave away, or sold it, to 20% of uranium to Russia. Bad in and of itself. Now, there was a second deal a little bit later where Obama allowed Rosatom to sell its Canadian company's uranium to Americans, to American nuclear plants. And basically they'd never been allowed to do that before. Now, and you may think, well, it's not sounding so bad up to this point. Well, what happened during all of this time, there are allegations that, number one, it was sort of a Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, pay to play. So if you wanted to get a Russian deal, you wanted to get all this done, then you needed to give to, at the time, it was the Bill Clinton Foundation, which later became the Clinton Foundation. I don't know if you recall, he was given $500,000 to go to Russia during this time that they were negotiating these deals. Sort of to give a speech for $500,000, which I believe was somewhere around 2 times more than he normally got paid for a speech. Not a bad,
not a bad gig.
Not a bad gig. And at the time, he had to have his State Department, his wife's permission to go over there. He wanted to go over there and talk directly to the people involved in the Russian nuclear deal. And I don't know if he got her permission or not, but when he went over there,
that's comical to me, but good, continue.
I know,
I'm sorry.
that's as funny as the other,
Right.
the overcharging thing. But when he went over there, he talked to Putin himself. And then lo and behold, more donations come in to the Bill Clinton Foundation. And I'll stop at this point. Your thoughts up until this point.
Nothing the Clintons do surprises me. Bill Clinton to me is the epitome of the old saying, he only lies when his lips move. So nothing they do would surprise me. And I think that anything that they're involved with that benefits them or their foundation, which now I guess is defunct, there is probably always going to be some personal benefit. I just believe that's the kind of people they are. 25 years ago, a good friend of mine who's an evangelist, a prophecy teacher, made the connection biblically between the Clintons and King Ahab and his queen Jezebel, and how they were always involved with some kind of corruptible practices. In the Bible, Ahab wanted a vineyard that belonged to a guy by the name of Naboth, and he tried to buy it from him, and the guy wouldn't sell his inheritance. And so Jezebel hatched this plan to have him killed and then, take his property away from him, and not that they've had anybody killed, but the things that they deal with, what was that big land deal they were involved with back in the 80s? White water or something. Yeah. Remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
All right. So, all of this stuff follows them, all this baggage, all this talk has followed them and dogged them all of their political careers, but where there's smoke, there's usually fire. So anyway, all of that is to say, if Clinton got paid $500,000 to go and speak in Russia, something's up. You would think that, how many Russians over there want to hear Bill Clinton that badly? I mean, that doesn't seem kosher. So anyway, that's my thoughts so far.
And also with that deal that you were talking about, coincidentally, I guess, a guy got killed. I don't you remember that somebody that was working for the Clinton administration.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that. And, that seems to be the, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Pattern.
Yeah. Okay. That'll work. That seems to be the way it goes, right?
The way it goes. Now, getting back to this uranium deal, part of what was going on, or supposedly, people were indicted, I think went to prison for this. So we know that executives at the company kicked back about $2 million to the Russians in exchange for lucrative no-bid contracts, which is a scheme that violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So we know that was going on. The feds also learned that the Russian nuclear officials had gotten millions of dollars into the United States designed to benefit, this is allegations, designed to benefit the Clinton Foundation. At the same time, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton served on a government committee that signed off on deals like this. So at the time, supposedly, the FBI was investigating all of this. And the question arises, how much did the FBI know at the time before the deals were signed on by the Obama administration and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton? And did they tell anybody? And what's also interesting is you have to know who the players were at the time. Eric Holder, you remember him as the U.S. Attorney General. He sat on the committee. He was on the Foreign Investments Committee, and this is the committee that would help to decide whether or not we were going to have a contract. And he helped. He was one of those people that approved that Uranium One deal. And you had a lot of people who were involved in that Uranium One deal saying, yeah, it sounds good. Go ahead, sign off. A lot of agencies were looking at it. So, it begs the question, and all the things that we did in 2014 and 2015, and all this information that came to light, where this the guy Vadim Mikarin was his name, and I'm sure I messed that up, and he was from Russia, and he was doing these. He supervised what was called a racketeering scheme, what I just kind of mentioned, that involved the extortion, the bribery, the money laundering, the kickbacks that were directed by Russia and provided kickbacks to top Russian energy officials with ties to the Kremlin, according to this report, and exposed when he was doing that. And what we have found out since then, it was a lot of national security breaches, because this had given a no-bid contract to this company, Transport Logistics International, that transported Russian uranium around the U.S. in return for more than $2 million in kickbacks. So we were having kickbacks from the Russians. We were having a national security breach. And all the time we're saying, okay, you knew this, Eric Holder. You knew this, Obama. You knew this, Hillary Clinton. And Hillary says, baloney. What do you say?
Well, you know what I said earlier about Bill? It applies to Hillary as well, obviously. We are instructed in Scripture, to respect those who are in office, not necessarily because we agree or we support those particular individuals, but biblically we are to understand that for better or for worse, God raises up, God brings down, he puts people in position to serve his purposes. And so one of the things that I've been challenged with as a believer when it comes to the Clintons is when they've held office, maintaining that biblical mandate to respect the office, not necessarily the individual. But Hillary Clinton is not in office now. So
Is she not really?
Yeah, well, yeah, true. To me, she's the epitome of evil. I mean, there is a difference between wickedness and evil, actually. Wickedness is doing what's wrong, sometimes ignorantly, sometimes consciously, but evil is diabolical. Evil is plotting. Evil is scheming. And so she strikes me as that kind of a person. So once again, I don't find it outlandish to think that anything they're going to be involved with is going to somehow or another benefit them, and particularly in their play for power. I think that's what she's more interested in. The money is one thing, but the money is a means to an end. The money is, to make a play for power, because I think that's what interests her the most. But now let me go off on something else here, as it is still related to the topic, and that is, and I think I know the answer, but just for the benefit of those who will be listening, what is the benefit to the Russians to obtain all this uranium?
Well, it's power and control on their part, too.
Yeah. Well, it's something that they would find very useful, I would think, in a certain types of weaponry and things like that. Of course, I'm sure they're using it for peaceful purposes, like Iran is. But
absolutely.
Anyway, well, I'm also struck with the fact that, over the last, 18 months, and maybe that's, I think it's been at least 18 months, there's been this whole thing about the Trump administration or the Trump campaign and Russian collusion and all this kind of stuff. And so it's just kind of ironic that once again, we see that those who are the loudest in making accusations about someone else, it would appear that maybe they are guilty of the very thing that they were accusing others of, because there seems to be a lot more substance to this Russian collusion than to what the accusations that have been made where the Trump administration is concerned.
Absolutely. And you raise a good point about what would Russia be doing, with the uranium, and what do they need it for? And as we know that they have dealings with Iran,
Right.
And Iran was later on, Iran had an agreement with the United States that they couldn't make nuclear weapons, but it didn't stop Russia from doing that and doing it for them. So not only would Russia be interested in getting the uranium and buying it, but they'd also be interested in selling it to Iran. And this is a big supposition. It's an allegation. There's no proof behind this. So I'm not blaming anybody for it. So to speak. But we also know that Obama was not a friend of Israel. And so, I mean, if you look at it, if there are ties, if we can tie the uranium sales to Iran, and Iran clearly hates Israel and wants to get rid of Israel, were we selling this to Russia, knowing that potentially it could go and be used against Israel?
Well, and basically going through the back door to get it to Iran.
Exactly.
Seeing that the Obama administration was very motivated to strike some kind of a deal, an agreement with the nation of Iran, putting the uranium directly in their hands, obviously, they thought would be a bridge too far. But I think that's a good, I think that might even be closer to the truth than anything we've heard, frankly, given the clandestine nature of the Obama administration and some of the other activities, the guns that were, fast and furious and all of that, how we were selling this weaponry and some, undercover operation to people who we knew what they were going to use them for. So the precedent is there for dealing with potential enemies or people who would do harm against the interest of the United States, but in the interest of people who are Marxist and who are very anti-American, anti-Israel, and as far as I'm concerned, anti-God.
Yeah. Well, and I want to remind everybody, welcome in the chat room, and if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to make them during the show. It's perfectly fine. And I'll read some of them if I can, and we'll try to answer your questions. And getting back, Bill, to what you were talking about too. Now, here's the other part of it is you were kind of starting to go down that road, is that we have to look and see who would have done this investigation? Who were these players? And you have, again, as I said, Eric Holder, who was the Attorney General at the time, DOJ. Then we also, under him, or somewhere in that, I don't know exactly how it works, but you've got the FBI. And so the FBI director at the time was Robert Mueller.
Yep. Right.
And so under him, who was leading the investigation at the time, was Rod Rosenstein. And you might remember that Rod Rosenstein is the one that appointed the special counsel, Mueller, to investigate the Russian collusion. And also we have McCabe in there, who was around under the Obama administration. So did these people do an investigation? And I say these people, that's Holder, Mueller, and Rosenstein specifically. Did they do an investigation? Did they know all of this information? And did they sit on it? Or did they know this information and everybody else knew the information? They told Clinton, they told Obama, and they didn't care, because the bigger picture was to go out and do what it was that they wanted to do, which was money and power, maybe to do, impact Israel over here. So it was worth them to do that. How many of these people may, if we can get the DOJ to do it, how many of these people may have to answer to and be responsible for what their participation in all of this was?
Well, to that, I could only say that things that are done in darkness will be brought to light. The Messiah said that. When God has perfect timing. His timing doesn't always jive with what I would like to see done, when I'd like for it to be done. But in the end, anything that is done in darkness will be brought to light, and particularly if it has the intention of bringing harm against Israel, against the people of God. In fact, I brought up a scripture I wanted to read, if you don't mind. It's Psalm 83, and it says, "Do not keep silent, O God, and do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. And they have taken crafty counsel against your people, have consulted together against your sheltered ones or your precious ones. And here's what they're conspiring to do. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. And so it goes on from there to say how they have conspired and have gotten together and formed a conspiracy against God and against God's people. And I would add to that we're not just talking about the nation of Israel, but we're talking about God's people wherever they may be. All right. So my point, it seems to be some substantial indicators here that there has been some kind of conspiracy, some kind of a lot of backdoor deals, a lot of money being exchanged, things that at the very least are questionable as to if they infringe upon national security, things that have all of the telltale marks of being anti-Israel. So, and look, it's not a secret. Obama was no friend to Israel.
Right.
Not his administration, by and large, not a friend to Israel. And
not only that, Bill, but he tried to interfere with Israel's elections, as you may recall.
I do recall that, but that's different. That's because
yeah, he didn't want Netanyahu to be reelected, and he did try to interfere with that. And seemingly that's okay. Maybe we should do an investigation with that, but that'll never happen.
Well, look, they're not friends to Israel. And so if you start conspiring against Israel, when you start conspiring against God's people and God's purposes, I have a feeling that, it may not happen when I want it to happen. It may not happen the way I want it to happen. But eventually, those kinds of things that are done in darkness, God brings to light. And when he brings them to light, he deals with them pretty swiftly and pretty harshly, frankly. So if that is what's going on here, then Susan, then what I think, need to do as believers is check our hearts first, because vengeance is mine, says the Lord. It doesn't belong to us. But what we should pray for is that he would, as we read in Psalm 83, that he would come to our defense, that he would come to the defense of his people, that he would deal with his enemies, and that he would bring things that are done in darkness, that he would bring them to light.
Yeah, and I think that, we have another issue that's kind of going on with this too, and another player, if you will, in all this. And this is the FBI informant that originally went to the FBI and said, look, there's a lot of extortion going on and bribery and everything else. And this person had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which is, from what I understand and talking to different people, this is something that's really rare, that you don't have anybody do something like that. It was kind of an unusual thing. They wouldn't give him a copy of it, so he doesn't really know what he signed, according to what we're hearing. And the attorney for this FBI informant is saying, hey, I want my client to testify. I want to be able for him, I think it's a him, to tell you exactly what happened with all of this, and let's open this up.
Well, I know what you're talking about, but just for the sake of those who are listening, maybe they're not up to speed on that. Give us a little bit more information on what this informant was actually involved with.
Well, this was the guy who sort of blew the whistle back in 2009, saying, hey, you don't want to enter into an agreement with these people because look at all the stuff that's happening. I mean, people are getting money in the Clinton Foundation. People in Russia are getting money. Bill Clinton's getting a whole bunch of money. So he was kind of the person that sort of was blowing that open for everybody. And like Brenda Liz says here, I'm praying for this person every day. His or her life is in danger. Please pray for this FBI informant. And absolutely. And people are saying, we need the DOJ to just do away with that non-disclosure agreement and say we won't go after you if you speak. Now, I don't know what kind of pressure is coming. I don't know if Attorney General Sessions is sitting there going, well, I can't really say anything because this is connected to Russia, could have something to do with the election, although all of this happened before that. Right. I think Jeff Sessions needs to come out and do something.
Well, that has been a question mark in my mind for a while now as to why. Look, if people are innocent, then an investigation will bring that to light. You know, so exactly. What would be the hesitation in opening up an investigation to prove or disprove? You know, to just let's see what the truth is. And so I've wondered, you know, why would the Justice Department not move forward on something like this? And so that leads me to wonder if there aren't some, you know, things in the background, you know, going on as well. So we need to pray. Not only for this person who is the informant, we need to pray for those who are in leadership now, that they will not do what's right to you and me, but they will do what's right, and that they will pursue these things. And let's see what the truth is. Let's see where this thing goes. And anyway, that's what I think.
Yeah, and you can't really make the argument for the DOJ. They can't really say, well, you know, national security, there's a lot of classified information. We can't have him telling them. You can do all this behind closed doors. You don't have to allow anybody else to hear the testimony, you know, of what he's going to say. The House and the Senate can both hear this information, and that'll be it. So I see no reason. Now, I don't know if Congress has a way to bypass what this non-disclosure agreement and say, you know, we're just going to render it null and void. I don't know that they have the authority to do that. And then you also, at the same time, let's say Jeff Sessions says, well, this is part of the, you know, could be connected to Russia and the interference in the elections. So I'm not going to have any part to do with it. What do you think, Rod Rosenstein? What should I do?
Yeah, that doesn't go very far, does it?
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Because Rod Rosenstein knows this informant very well, because he would have conducted those investigations. And he was the lead investigator on these investigations back in 2009, 2010. He knows this person. He knows what this person is going to say. And this person is the one who could say, you know what? Rod Rosenstein, Mueller, they knew all of this. I told them all of this, and they decided to do A or B.
Who knows what is going on in these offices and, you know, and in these conversations. But here is what I have a sense about. And I'm not going to say God told me this. It's just a sense I have. And we can apply it to this situation, the Benghazi thing, you know, and all of the different, I think what we're talking about really is the central issue, and it has tentacles going out in all kinds of different directions that have touched a lot of different things that that have happened in the news over the last several years. But I would also apply what I'm about to say to even what's going on in the NFL. And I don't want to get off topic and get onto that, but I have this sense that what is recorded in Hebrews 12, where it says that God will one day speak and it's going to shake heaven and earth, and everything that is not worthy of standing is going to be shaken and it's going to crumble and fall. And so I have this sense that these institutions, industries, all these things that have gotten away with things, they've become big, powerful, wealthy, and it's not established on things that are pure and virtuous. I have a feeling that the cracks in their foundation are beginning to crumble, and things are beginning to topple and beginning to fall, and things are beginning to be exposed. And not all at once initially, but slowly, surely, the cracks are there, and eventually it's going to reach a tipping point, that all of these things are going to be just come to light. That's what I have a sense about all of these different things. And which then again brings me back to, we need as believers we need to pray what Psalm 83 prays. These people who've conspired against you, God, these people who've conspired against your people, you deal with them. You confront them. We would mess things up, Susan. We would do it the political way, the vengeful way. We would mess things up. But if we call upon God to deal with these kinds of things, and I know that there have been people who've been praying for years and years and years, but there's something different now. I just sense it. Yep. There's something different going on now, and we need to appeal to the Creator. You deal with them, God, and you bring forth what's righteous, and you bring forth what's true. And he said, like in Hebrews 12, he said that he's going to shake everything. Haggai 2 says that he will shake all nations. And he does it not only to expose the wickedness and the plots and the conspiracies, but also in doing that, exposing to the world what is true, what is righteous, what is pure. So whether we're talking about uranium or, pay for play or whatever it is, all these things kind of converging at one time kind of leaves me with that impression. God's doing something. I believe that.
No, I agree. And so Robin agrees, and Brenda Liz agree as well. And Jeffrey is saying something which we kind of said at the beginning, with all due respect, please excuse the sarcasm. Those who routinely speak out against Hillary Clinton either have a tendency to disappear or die. And that's kind of what we were talking about. And I agree with you, Bill. There is something different. There is something going on right now that we haven't seen. I don't know that I've seen it in my lifetime, where corruption, and there's a ton of corruption, it's starting to be exposed, or at least the fact that we're talking about it, whether it's Hollywood, whether it was something that just came out the other day in Silicon Valley, or where the guy was accused of sexually molesting a 3-year-old. And he was an executive there in Silicon Valley. Things like this that I think that a lot of people have kept hidden over time. People that knew about it in Hollywood were finding out. Everybody kind of knew about what Weinstein is being accused of doing, and yet nobody came forward. People are starting to come forward. We see that the Republicans right now, what we're talking about today in Uranium One, we see them kind of sitting back, and we're going, wait a minute, you've got the fox guarding the hen house. You have a guy, who was connected, Mueller, FBI director. He's connected with all of this. Whether he did anything wrong, we don't know, but he's connected with the past and what with Russia in the past and selling the uranium and being 1,000 times worse than any type of potential, interference with our elections, which I will have to say, former President Jimmy Carter, who I'm not a fan of, came out the other day and said, you know what, I think basically in so many words, this whole thing about Russia and interference with elections, there's no proof there. There's nothing there. Okay, so everybody knows, most everybody, that there's nothing there. And yet we have this whole thing about Uranium One that everybody's known about. And everybody knew when when Mueller got appointed that he was connected to, and yet everybody acted like, everything's okay. But now all of a sudden, Americans are saying, we're putting 2 and 2 together here. Everything is not okay, and we want something done about it. And just this morning, the House decided that they were going to do their own investigations into Uranium One to see if potentially there's anything there.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if someone who's going to be in that is going to have the tenacity to really dig and expose what the truth of the matter is. Sometimes, unfortunately, these House committees and these Senate committees, it's all smoke and mirrors, and nothing really ever happens.
Right.
So I'm not going to put my confidence, frankly, in the House or the Senate and their committees and their investigative processes. But I will put my confidence that if God wants some things exposed, they'll be exposed. And like I said, and you brought out a good point. I had kind of forgotten about that, to put that together with all of this. I don't think it's an accident, Susan, that all this is happening in Hollywood, and the very industry, the film industry is shaking. It's being shaken.
Yeah.
What was it? The CEO of Amazon, he had to resign or was thinking about resigning or something like that.
He had to resign. Yeah, he resigned.
Because of the connections to the whole Hollywood fiasco. And I just find it beyond being accidental or coincidental that all of these things are happening at one time. And that's why I said what I did. I have this sense that God is speaking. He's shaking everything. And we're just seeing the first indicators. We're just seeing the first signs. And anytime he does something like this, I'm choosing to believe that he gives people an opportunity to come clean, an opportunity to turn their ways around, whether that's an individual or a nation. I have to say, and this, maybe I shouldn't, but I don't see someone like a Clinton really changing. Yeah. They could. Anything's possible. I just find it very, very hard to see that. But he does begin to do these things and gives people opportunity to rectify the situation, to make things right. But if they don't, and if we don't, then eventually all these things collapse for everybody to see. Yeah. I just feel like that's what is happening right now.
But I agree with you in regards to having this House committee look at stuffing and, the Senate, because typically nothing comes out of it. We haven't seen a lot coming out of it in the past. They do a lot of talking, but they don't do a lot of, concrete work that we see. But that's why a special counsel should have been appointed. Why didn't we demand that a special counsel? And maybe the American public should now demand that a special counsel be appointed to look into this, and then find the special counsel. Who's that going to be? Somebody that's not connected to the Clintons.
Well, we need to find Elliot Ness. We need to get the Untouchables back.
Yeah, I think we do. And that would be very hard. But we need to push this. We really do. Because as I was saying to somebody earlier this morning on my other show, a 2-year-old could put this together. Yeah. And say there's something wrong here.
All right, now let me throw this out. Everybody that's been following us here knows that I'm not on the Trump train. I've always had my, being cautious, and hesitations about certain things. But because he's the president, I pray for him and I pray that he will do the right thing. All right. But I have to admit that in certain situations, Trump would say something that sounded outlandish, stupid. Why did you say that? And then lo and behold, 6 weeks later, 2 months later, it turns out that was correct. All right. So here's where I'm going. Has he been just kind of letting this ride, knowing all the time where this was going to lead? That I just can't help but wonder, if he, the reason he didn't want to fire Mueller, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thought. Maybe they thought they were trying to trap him, and maybe the whole time they're being entrapped by their own devices. I don't know. I'm just kind of a random thought.
But Bill, and a lot of people think that, especially on the left, that Donald Trump is a buffoon, he's deranged, he's this and that. And I think a lot of that, they just say that because they want people to think that. But the thing of it is, there are some things that he knows, like you said, that do come out, and you're like, how did you know that? How did you know that? And you have to scratch your head. And we've talked about this before, whether you like Trump or dislike Trump, divine providence got him in this position that he's in right now.
If he's in the White House, I choose to believe it's because God put him there. And to be fair, I say that with Obama too. Yeah. If God put him in the Oval Office, God put him there. But to serve God's purposes, not necessarily to endorse this person as a man of God, but to serve God's purposes. So I absolutely agree with that. So bringing it back to what we just talked about, I'm thinking about, when Trump was talking about how he was, they were bugging him and spying on him, surveilling and all this kind of stuff. And everybody was, no, that they didn't do that. And where's the proof? And And then lo and behold, there's some proof of that. So I've just kind of had this thought in the back of my mind, maybe this guy's pretty shrewd and crafty, not just in the business world, but maybe he's learned pretty quick how to be shrewd and crafty in the political world. I don't know. Yeah. We'll see. But it's just something I was thinking.
Well, and you got to understand too, and I think you probably know this and other people know it as well. He's been around these people. Right. He used to be in those circles and somewhat with the Democrats. He understands, probably their playbook, pretty well, I would say. And so he knows what they think and maybe what they would do. I'm not saying that he has proof of everything, but I think he's pretty much put two and two together. And one thing I wanted to bring up, because this is something that I wanted to mention as part of this whole investigation on Uranium One and how far this could go, Bill. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg, even in talking about the people that we've talked about today. But you remember the whole Bundy family in Nevada, mm-hmm. and you remember how there was an Oregon standoff.
Right.
And this was one of the men, Lavoy Finicum, who we still don't really know all the ins and outs. At least I don't. I haven't seen this in the news. When the standoff was kind of ending, or so it seemed, these people were coming down the hill, and I don't know where they were going necessarily, but they weren't going to stay where they were. And the FBI agents and maybe some a different agency made the car stop, told everybody to get out.
Wasn't ATF involved with that too?
Yeah, involved in that. And as they get out of the car, as Lavoy gets out of the car, as I recall, his hands were raised at some point. There's claims that, he reached for the gun and they killed him and all that. And then other bullets, I think, went into the car when people were still in the car. And obviously at that point didn't seem to be a threat to anyone. But anyway, Lavoy is dead. So, a person that I know that, her name is Cheryl Chumley, she's been on my show a couple of times. She used to work for WND. She now works for the Washington Times. Back when we were talking about this under Obama and nobody could do anything with the Uranium One deal, but we were talking about it years ago under Obama. She wrote an article based upon what another reporter had talked about. The reporter's name is John Rappaport. And he had an interesting angle at the time that I think everybody just sort of went, kind of conspiracy theory, but but his angle was that, Lavoy Finicum and those people in Oregon at the standoff were part of this deal about the Iranian deal. And people are like, what are you talking about? How is an Oregon standoff have anything to do with the Clintons and the Uranium One deal? Well, here's this little excerpt in the article that says, coincidentally, the mine development was proposed for the same general area of the widely reported standoff between protesters and federal and police forces.
Okay, so let me put this together. Okay, let me stop you right there because I haven't heard this before.
Yeah.
What this reporter was saying is that there was a standoff with these people in Nevada that just happened to be coincidentally in the area where this uranium would be mined from that was going to go to Russia in this deal.
It was Oregon, though.
It was Oregon?
The Bundy people they lived in Nevada, but the Bundy people were in Oregon at this standoff.
All right. But that's the connection, is that they're coincidentally, this all happened in the area where this uranium was to be mined that was going to go to Russia, right? Yeah. Well, sometimes when things are too coincidental, they're probably not a coincidence. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. That is very interesting. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but I wanted to make sure I was making the connection there.
No, but I'm glad you said it like that to just, drive the point home. And there were other about 38,000 or so acres, I believe I read, in the area on the West Coast that was being sold, and where this uranium was going to be, where the areas that they had already selected.
And I'm trying to piece my recollection together here, but it seems like that was over the Bureau of Land Management not allowing them, to use the land for their cattle and things like that, and they'd been using it for forever,
Yeah.
and the state or the feds were trying to kind of keep them off the land. Is that right? Something like that?
Yeah, that's what was happening in Nevada, which also, that was at their property in Nevada. That was what started the whole Bundy thing in Nevada, which, there's always been supposition there about what is it that the government wanted on their land, that they wanted to get the Bundys off the land. I mean, it's the same thing. Did it have anything to do with this Russia uranium? I don't know. Did it have to do with Harry Reid in China? I don't know. But it's all very interesting, and it's all allegations, at this point. But I guess my point is, these are the things that we need to be looking into. This is the reason we need a special counsel to be looking into all of these things that are just now coming out under a president where we can talk about these things now and actually maybe get something done, although he's being stopped at almost every turn.
Which is why we need to pray for God's purposes in this president, whatever they are, that they would come to pass. I think, and this is something I've felt very strongly about, and we need to we not only need to pray for the president, but we need to pray that the people around the president will be those that will pursue justice and righteousness and the truth, these kinds of things. And because it seems to me that if there's any conspiracy going on, it seems to be that everybody wants to stop this guy from doing what he set out to do. Yeah. Again, I don't agree with everything he says. I don't agree with everything he promotes. But if God put him there for a reason, and it has to do with exposing the corruption and these tentacles and all these webs, that where people profit off of the backs of the citizens of this nation. And then those kinds of things need to be brought to light. And so maybe that's what he's in there for. Maybe he is going to be one of God's main instruments to bring about and to expose the corruption. I can't speak for God, but having the sense I do about what's happening, it just kind of makes me wonder if that's not why he's there.
Well, and you look at it, under Obama, this would never have happened. We wouldn't have, True. This would not have been revealed.
True that.
Yeah. And I think if we had another GOP, let's say Ted Cruz, let's say if he won, I don't think we would be seeing this under Ted Cruz. And as much as that I liked Ted Cruz in the beginning, I don't think Ted Cruz would have gone this far and would have exposed this type of corruption. I don't think we would have even gotten to this point where it was a possibility that he could have exposed this type of corruption.
Well, I confess that and concede that, Cruz is more polished. And even though I believe, I kind of closer to his views where the Constitution is, right. Trump is unconventional.
Yeah.
They can't pin him in. They can't hem him in. They can't pin him down. They think they've got him over here and then he's busting out over there. We're being speculative here about what right. God's purposes might be, but I do feel very strongly that he's there for a reason, and we need to pray that God's purposes come to pass, for what he has this administration to do. And if it is connected to the whole concept of things being exposed and the conspiracies and the collusion and the corruption being exposed, as detrimental as things falling will be short term, I think that we need to pray that God's purpose would come to pass. The Bundy connection. I've never heard that. It's very interesting. Does it seem far-fetched? No, it really doesn't. No. I don't really think it's that far-fetched. And that
was written a couple of years ago. It wasn't even recently, as all this is being uncovered. This was written a couple of years ago when we didn't know as much as we know now.
Interesting. So, well, my mind is spinning. I'm thinking about this.
I know. It really makes you think. And how much don't we know We think we know a lot. And I think, Bill, that we're not even looking at half of what is still yet to be uncovered. And Liz is agreeing with you, saying it seems God is sifting the nation and sifting the church. Unrighteousness coming to the surface in our government as well in the true bride. God is moving definitely. And I would have to absolutely agree. Yeah,
and I would go and add this too. What happens in the government, what's happening in the nation and the society, actually is a reflection of his people and the corruption within his people. Judgment must begin in the house of God. And so he comes and visits us first. And I think he has been doing that, frankly. But we're beginning to see these telltale signs that he's getting ready to expose some things, bring down some things.
Yes.
No one is exempt from what he says he will do. He will shake heaven and earth. He will shake everything. And that includes me. It includes you. It includes everybody watching and listening here to some degree or the other. I just feel that's what's going on. I think we're seeing maybe the embryonic stages of it, but I believe that's what's happening here.
No, I do too. And one of the things I think that, a long time ago, and it's been a while now, but a long time ago, people used to put all their faith in the government and our government, and you would believe whatever the government said. And I think God, again, I'm not you. I can't think for God and speak for God, but I'm thinking that God is looking at that and saying, you're putting all of your faith into false gods, really. I mean, if you sit there and you believe everything the government says. But I had a guest on my show who wrote a book called I'm with the government and I'm here to kill you. And it was all about the government and how they do things and they get away with things. And while we were talking, there was, a lot of stuff that he brought up that it kind of goes along with what's happening right now. I think there was a slight shift years ago when, I don't know if you recall Ruby Ridge and with the Weaver family, where the way I look at it and I discussed with my guests, it was more like entrapment, where they wanted Weaver to be an informant. He refused. He lived off the grid in Idaho. So that was another thing they didn't like. Here's this guy, he won't cooperate with the FBI and he wants to live off the land and not be connected to anybody. And they had an informant that went out and tried to get him to sell guns to them. And the informant basically said, now this is my understanding, I need you, I'll buy a shotgun, but it needs to be a sawed-off shotgun at this certain length. And the informant knew that was an illegal length, that you couldn't have that on your firearm. So he went ahead and Weaver went ahead and did it, probably needing the money, sold it to the guy. I don't know if Weaver knew it was illegal. Maybe knew or should have known. Either way, it doesn't really matter.
Well, if he knew guns, he knew.
Yeah, so. He knew guns, he knew. But again, it is entrapment when you have an informant that's doing that, because Weaver didn't say, here, I'm going to give you a gun, but I'm going to saw it off for you and give it to you illegally. He was sort of coaxed into it, if you want to look at it that way. And all of this to say that in the end, Weaver's son was killed, 14-year-old son. His wife had a sniper bullet to the head, killed her, blew off part of her head and neck, and their dog was killed. And an FBI agent was killed also in the process. It didn't have to happen. It was almost like a setup with what happened in Ruby Ridge. And in the end, Weaver was found guilty of nothing except, something small like, oh, you didn't come to a bail hearing, or, and he had to pay $10,000. Very, very small, but there were no criminal charges brought against him. And the government, nothing was brought against them as well. And I think in an instant like that, it started changing people's minds about who the government really was.
Well, look, we don't live in the 50s anymore. This is not Beaver Cleaver era.
For sure.
And the government back then I'm sure they didn't tell everybody everything, and they didn't come clean about things that maybe they should have.
And I believe, wasn't that was in, Ruby Ridge was in 1992. Wasn't that?
So that was the Clinton era, wasn't it? As was Waco. Government is, and I think the founders more or less paraphrase this, government is a necessary evil,
Right.
But nonetheless, anytime people have power, they're going to try to get more power. That's just the nature of it. And that's where we're at now. We're coming to the culmination of things, I believe. And so there are wicked people. There are greedy people. There are corrupt people that are in power because people by and large are corrupt. We've abandoned God's ways. We've abandoned God's principles. And so it is recorded for us, and my mind just went blank as far as where this is. But I think it's in Ezekiel, but he basically tells his people, look, if you won't live according to my laws because you think they're too hard, I will put you under governments and you'll have to live by their laws. Yeah. And you really won't be able to live according to their laws because it'll be oppressive, and it's a paraphrase of what he's saying. But basically, you abandon my laws, I'll put you under man's laws, and you'll see how tough they are. And I kind of think that's where we are now. So the question on the table is, or at least this is what I hear you saying, is people began to doubt whether or not we can believe the government. Should we believe the government? Should we trust the government? And I think, generally speaking, the answer is no. Yeah. Because they're men. We cannot put our confidence and trust in men. The best of men will fail us. The best of men will let us down. In ancient Egypt, Pharaoh was considered to be a god. And when it came to Israel, God's people, there was a time that they feared Pharaoh more than they feared God. And so God began to pour out the plagues. He began to shake Egypt so that the things that people had placed their trust and confidence in one by one crumbled. That's what's happening, Susan. Yeah. And that includes men and women, whether they're politicians and, frankly, whether they're pastors and ministers. You cannot put a person in the place that is reserved for the Creator. So we have, I'm sorry, let me just get this one point out. We're short on time. Mm-hmm. But that's really the essence of what's going on here, is all the things that we have looked to place our confidence in. God is showing us, don't do that. Put him back where he's supposed to be. Then all of these other things will fall into their proper place. So is it unpatriotic to question the government? Absolutely not. Is it unpatriotic to demand of our government that they be truthful with us, that they do what's right? It is not. Is it dangerous?
Yeah. I think we've seen that it is, and it can be. And I think, Bill, that we are really in a time, in the end times that we all know that we're in, that where we are seeing right now, there's almost like a clear cut line between good and evil. And there's really sort of like no in between anymore. And it's becoming obvious. You have, the good on one side where, you're trying to see the American public and the president trying to drain the swamp, trying to bring back, honesty and trust in the United States. And over here on the other side that you see the Harvey Weinsteins and the Silicon Valleys and all the swamp over here. And it's just, there is a clear cut line. Antifa over here, Christians over here. And it is a true battle of good and evil that in my mind has never been more clear and obvious as it is right now.
Well, and if that line of distinction is being drawn, is becoming clear, then that brings to mind another scripture. When Joshua speaks to the children of Israel, he says, "Choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord." This is the question that Elijah put to Israel on Mount Carmel. How long are you going to go back and forth between two opinions? If the Lord is God, serve him. If Baal is God, or if you will, the government, your institutions, Hollywood, if that's God, serve them. Make up your mind. And today's the day. We're at that time.
Absolutely. And Marlene says, so many are deceived, dear Lord, open their eyes. And that's where we're going to leave it today. And totally agree with you, Marlene. I thank everybody for being here today. Thank you for your comments. They were great for us today, and hope you enjoyed the show. Please share this with everyone you know. Email it to everyone you know so that they can learn about our show. So thanks again. God bless you. We'll see you again next week. Take care.
Bye.